随着通货膨胀和美联储加息，很多国家的资产价格都陷入了暴跌状态，很多投资者心灰意冷，割肉退场。但是对于聪明的投资者来说，这可能是我们等待一生的机遇，能不能翻身就看你是否抓得住机遇，获得折价入场的机会，因为这可能会快速改变你的财务状况，让你赚到一辈子都无法想象的财富。有华尔街摇钱树之称，旗下方舟投资的8只基金曾经年平均收益率141%，旗舰基金回报率更达到了一年360%，致力于寻找下一个行业颠覆者，备受金融界推崇的基金经理 Cathie Wood 前几天呢发表了对2023年经济、金融和科技行业的展望，描述了未来几年之内科技创新将会给人们的生活带来的改变，同时也意味着投资这些行业，你的财富可能会获得指数增长 Exponential growth。在近代的人类历史里边，世界经历了3次大规模科技创新，包括蒸汽机发明推动的第一次工业革命，电能广泛使用推动的第二次工业革命，和近代信息技术推动的第3次工业革命。每一次的工业和科技革命都让世界财富总量暴增，通过财富重新分配，让默默无闻的普通人摇身一变成了富豪阶层。那么下一次的科技革命到底因何而起？什么时候到来？对我们的生活会产生什么样重大的影响？而最重要的是，我们普通人如何才能搭上这趟科技革命的顺风车，快速积累财富，早日达到财富自由呢？今天最擅长寻找未来指数增长投资机会的 Cathie Wood 是如何预测2023年以及今后3到5年我们将会迎来的翻天覆地的市场变化和其中的投资机会的。
The Fed has been raising interest rates aggressively, and it's affecting every country around the world, every market around the world. And we have taken a strong point of view. The Fed is making a mistake, and that it will find out soon, and it will reverse its position. If you take a look at what has happened this time, the yield curve, which is the difference between long-term and short-term interest rates, hasn't been this inverted since the early 80s.
Cathie Wood 说的收益率曲线倒挂 （inverted yield curve） 就是说，在相同的信用情况下，长期债务比短期债务的利息率要更低。比如说，你贷款买房都是用房产本身和你未来的收入做抵押和担保的，这就是相同信用的情况下。正常时期呢，1年定期贷款利息要高于5年定期贷款利息。比如说1年是5%，5年呢是3%，时间长要打个折嘛。但是倒挂就是说变成1年3%，5年5%，这就不正常了。尤其是国债的收益率倒挂，倒挂这件事情呢，经历过很多市场起伏的验证之后，大家都认为能够准确预测经济萧条。
Since the early 80s.And so that was when we had a real inflation problem caused by the 70s and even the 60s, the Vietnam War and the Great Society social programs. So that was a 15-year problem that Chairman Volcker at the time had to tackle. Chairman Powell today thinks he has the same problem, but he does not. This inflation was not built over 15 years.This was a 15-month problem, and there's massive supply chain and problems and supply shocks that we believe have caused this problem. Sure, money shot up to 27% on a year-over-year basis in 2020. But now, money growth has collapsed in the United States. It has been negative since March.And we're seeing commodity prices capitulate, even the oil price. So at the upstream, commodity prices are falling. We see deflation. Downstream, because there's so much inventory around the world, because of over-ordering, as purchasing managers were fearful they would not have enough supplies for holiday. Now they are fighting with an inventory problem and they have to discount aggressively. But I do believe we're going to see deflation during the next 3 to 6 months that is going to force the Fed to change its spots. then our strategy should benefit on the other side.
就跟 Cathie Wood 说的一样，爱财说频道完整分析过收益率曲线倒挂和库存积压的问题。虽然我没有 Cathie Wood 那么乐观啊，他说的是3到6个月美联储就会改变策略，停止加息，甚至是降息。但是我呢也在根据 Cathie Wood 的分析调整自己的投资策略，毕竟谁都不愿意放过下一波的红利期嘛。但是目前呢，我们面对的通胀、加息、能源危机、战争、疫情等等问题，如何才能解决，让资本市场进入健康增长时期呢？我们继续来听听 Cathie Wood 的看法。
Innovation solves problems, and we have so many problems now. Innovation, and I'll just give you a microcosm of what I think could happen here. As we were getting a sense of how much of a disaster COVID was, the markets around the world dropped 30% within a month. Just a month, though. It was very short. And our strategy was down more. It was down 46%. At that time, we started saying, wait a minute, innovation solves problems. We have a massive problem here. It's called COVID. Our strategy from its bottom in 2020 to its peak in February of 21, it was up 360% because guess what? Innovation does solve problems, and our companies were key to finding out the sequence of COVID and enabling tests and finally the vaccine. Innovation solves problems, supply chain problems. The digitalization of the supply chain is beginning to solve that problem. Innovation solves problems. We had a war in Russia. Food prices, energy prices shot up. Electric vehicles have boomed through this period, and gas-powered vehicles have suffered. And so what we're seeing because of all of these problems is an accelerated shift towards innovation. But you'd never know it from the stock prices. I think truth wins out when interest rates come down, following inflation. I think what we saw in the aftermath of COVID will be repeated but not just for a one-year period, for the next 5 to 10 years.
我在听完上面这段演讲之后呢，感觉热血澎湃啊，希望终于来了。我当时分析市场的时候呢，认为市场未来的一波牛市将会比上一波，就是那波持续了10多年的牛市更长。现在居然找到了行业大佬和我观点相同啊，那整个人瞬间来了精神。但是以上只是 Cathie 的观点，我们现在看看他是用什么分析和事实来支撑的。相信我，你看完绝对会被震撼到。如果您对 YouTube 频道运营感兴趣，欢迎您参加我专门为大家制作的免费80分钟线上直播课，我如何1个月在 YouTube 赚1万美元，付费级别课程完全免费放出来跟大家分享，希望能够帮助您少走弯路，快速开通 YouTube 获利，把频道做大赚钱。报名链接在影片描述栏。如果您不是在 YouTube 上看到本期影片，请您私信我们获得报名链接。
So let me go through quickly the timeline for innovation, just to set this up. We are in a period now like none other in history. These have been the true disruptive innovations throughout history. And you'll notice there's only one other time before today that we have seen multiple innovation platforms evolve at the same time. It was the early 1900s. Telephone, electricity, and the automobile transformed the world. And believe it or not, we are in a period today a little bit like we were then. There was a pandemic back then. It was the Spanish flu. There was a war back then. It was World War I. Now, those problems were much worse than our problems today. But what happened? Innovation took off, and we ended up inflation peaking at 24% in June of 1920 and dropping within 1 year to minus 15% in June of 21. And having been through a very tough period, we ended up in what was called back then the Roaring 20s. It was a great time for the stock market. It was a great time for investments of all kinds because inflation and interest rates were coming down. Today, we have 5 innovation platforms evolving at the same time. Again, never happened in history. And the seeds for all of them were planted during the 20 years that ended in the tech and telecom bubble. Now, the tech and telecom bubble is the first time a lot of investors heard this concept, exponential growth. And they bought into the dream. But the problem was, back then, the technologies weren't ready. And if they were anywhere near ready, the costs were way too high. We didn't get the cloud until 2006 with AWS. We didn't get the big breakthroughs in artificial intelligence with deep learning until 2012. In the case of DNA sequencing, back in 2003, when the first whole human genome was sequenced, one person's genome, it had taken $2.7 billion and 13 years of computing power to sequence that one genome. Even if costs had collapsed the next day, the next year, by 75%, it would still have been too expensive. We've gone from $2.7 billion for one person's genome back then to $500 today, and a few hours of computing power. Next year, that will be $100 or $200. So we believe we are ready for prime time now. The technologies are ready, and the costs are low enough. That's critical. So what are these 5 platforms? DNA sequencing. We're going to be curing disease thanks to these breakthroughs. And in fact, robotics, industrial robot costs are dropping precipitously. We have a labor shortage. Innovation solves problems. The demand for robots is skyrocketing right now. Energy storage, I talked about that with the crisis in Ukraine. Consumer preference shifting to innovation in response not only to that tragedy and oil prices going up, but also because these are just better cars. They're more environmentally friendly, much more environmentally friendly. Artificial intelligence, the breakthroughs in AI today, I have to tell you, are mind-blowing even to us. Now, we are trying to look as far into the future as we can, and we are seeing breakthroughs that we expected in 5 or 10 years happening within 6 months and 1 year now. I don't know if any of you have heard about ChatGPT. Basically, you can say to it, prompt it and say, write me an essay on disruptive innovation as Cathie Wood would describe it. We did this exercise at a brainstorm. In less than 3 seconds, we had that, and it was pretty good. So ChatGPT-3 had a lot to go on. So that AI, we think the transformation is going to be far more than even we, focused only on disruptive innovation, thought even 1 year ago. And then finally, blockchain technology, and we'll get into that in a moment. I know it's quite controversial, but our conviction in decentralized, transparent networks has only increased. FTX was a centralized institution.
看完这段以后呢，我直接信心倍增，因为历史上可以看出种种的规律啊。比如说，第一次科技革命的时候，先发明了蒸汽机，然后出现了铁路和火车，改变了人们的生活。第二次科技革命先出现了内燃机，然后发明了电话和汽车。一个发明引出了另外3项发明，再次改变了人们的生活，给人们带来极大的财富。第三次科技革命先是出现了电脑，然后是网络，最终导致了包括能源存储、机器人、基因编辑、区块链和人工智能5项革新。这5项革新同时出现，会给人们的生活和财富带来多大的改变，我们目前只能畅想一下。不过可以从方舟基金对未来10年的技术革新和市场规模的预期看出来，他们会投资哪些行业。如果你对股票基金投资感兴趣，一定要集中精神听这一部分。
In 2020, we did a study on how productive these 5 innovation platforms were going to be. And you can see the growth rates that we were coming up with. Back then, truly disruptive innovation in the public equity markets were priced at roughly $14 trillion, less than 10% of the total global public equity market. 14 trillion. In the last year, that has gone to 7 trillion. Now, what has changed on the lower end of this, 2030? Nothing. In fact, if anything, those circles are bigger today than we thought. And one of the biggest reasons is artificial intelligence. So you can see the growth rates that we expect. These are compound annual growth rates in the middle there. They have gone up. Not the first one. That first one is not anything apart from innovation. We think it will be very slow growing, and we think there will be a lot of disruption and disintermediation in the traditional world order. So that 3% might be too optimistic. However, those other growth rates, our confidence has increased because the top circles have shrunk because the markets have come down. The bottom circles have actually expanded. So the opportunities are greater, the growth rates are greater. One of the reasons we think that those growth rates are greater is because of the convergence between and among technologies. And these are S-curves feeding S-curves feeding S-curves. So exponential growth compounded. Autonomous taxi platforms. We're seeing proof of concept cruise automation, which is GM's autonomous offering in San Francisco. I just took a ride in one of their cars, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Autonomous taxi platforms are the convergence of 3 of our major platforms. Robots. Autonomous vehicles are robots. Energy storage. They will be electric. And artificial intelligence. They're going to be powered by AI. So again, one S-curve feeding another S-curve feeding another S-curve, we think causing explosive opportunities. Another example in the healthcare space. We have multi-omic sequencing is one of the technologies, and artificial intelligence. Those two coming together, along with a technology that was made possible by DNA sequencing, CRISPR-Cas9, or gene editing generally. Those 3 platforms not only are going to cause explosive growth opportunities, but they are going to cure disease.
我们只有站在巨人的肩膀上，才能看得更远。我相信 Cathie Wood 对科技行业和科技革命的远见，对我们很多人来说都是震撼性的。我们现在正处在一个非常关键的历史时期，历史呢也正在重复，5大科技平台将会相互融合，产生出1+1大于2的效果。相关行业呢也很自然会出现指数增长。除了这些预期的增长潜力之外呢，另一个好处是相关行业资本市场还处在低潮期，比如说 Tesla、Twilio、Zoom、Block、Shopify 的股票全都在打折出售。作为价值投资一派的你，是不是应该高兴呢？市场中大把捡便宜的机会啊！下一次的工业革命或者说科技革命即将到来，而随之而来的就是我们一生难得一遇的暴富机会。重要的是你现在有没有醒悟，能不能意识到机遇可能就在眼前。当然，我并不是完全同意 Cathie Wood 的观点，我尤其对区块链技术保留看法，因为大家呢需要考虑它运营的方舟基金的盈利模式，只有你相信了它，才能去买它的基金，它才能赚钱，对吧？所以投资决策呢，你要自己做出来，不能依赖任何人的看法。或者说，如果你听了任何人的看法去投资，但是赔了钱，不要怨别人就好，自己的决策自己负责。